Good afternoon, National readers. Thank you very much for joining us. We have a very special guest on the podcast today in the shape of Alba Party leader Kenny MacAskill. Thank you for joining us, Kenny. How are you doing?
A pleasure. I'm very well. I'm delighted to be here. I know the Herald and National from days of old, but it's more the Albion Street, so it's good to be in the new premises.
Excellent. We're really grateful for you being here with us today. So, Kenny, I don't think you'll begrudge me for saying it's been a bit of a tricky time for Alba over the past year for various reasons. I do want to go back, first of all, to a year ago, the tragic death of former First Minister Alex Salmond, a huge shock to everyone in the independence movement. Are yourself and the party still coming to terms with that in a sense?
Well, yes, it's a grieving process. Obviously, it was a great shock and a huge loss. But, we've marked the first anniversary of his passing. We continue to drive forward to deliver his dream because we know that's what Alec would want. But, we keep in contact with the family. I keep in contact with Moira, his widow. So it's all just part of that cathartic grieving process. He will be a big loss and that will remain so. But we drive forward for his memory.
Yeah, do you feel the party will ever get over his loss?
No, he'll always be the spectre missing at the chair that should be there. But he was our founder, he was our leader, he was our friend. So we'll always regret that. But, Alec was always conscious that Scotland wasn't driven forward by one individual, even although he was pivotal and previous individuals had likewise been. The independence movement is a movement, and Alec just happened to be the leader that took it so close.
Mm-hmm. Are you still trying to work out what you are as a party without him? Because I think it's fair to say a lot of people will have joined Alba in the first instance because of Alex Salmond being that big figure at the helm. So are you still trying to work out what the party sort of is without him?
No, we're quite clear what we are. We're a party committed to Scottish independence. We believe that the referendum ship has sailed and therefore it has to be a plebiscite election. We're a democratic, left-of-centre party, social democratic, although the whole nature of these things are changing as our economy moves. We also recognise the rights of women and children. So we're quite clear where we are. We drive forward with that. And the position is, as many people joined, as I say, when Alba was set up. It was set up in 2021 to try and ensure that we could have a super majority. I think we look back now and realise that had Scotland got a super majority in 2021, then we wouldn't be facing some of the existential crisis we face with reform at the moment. But that has passed. But the whole concept of ensuring that we use the election as the democratic mandate for independence remains sacrosanct.
Why do you think getting that super majority would have avoided some of the problems that we have now?
Well, I think what happened was that the SNP Green government ran into a huge swathe of difficulties. To be fair, there was overarching the issue of COVID, but Scotland could have had the opportunity to drive forward. The supermajority would have been, I think, a better outcome for Scotland than what we ended up with, which was a failure to progress despite the majority being there in terms of a coalition. So we have that, but that's behind us. We have to look forward, and that's why, as I say, what we have to do is use the coming election as a plebiscite election, because the idea that the British government will blink has passed. It didn't happen with Boris Johnson. It's not going to happen with Kemi Badenoch or indeed Nigel Farage.
Mm-hmm. Just for our readers who may or may not know about what you're talking about when you say a plebiscite election, can you just kind of detail that for us, how you see it will work?
Well, the Supreme Court, going to the Supreme Court was a folly. Alec advised that. I don't think of any credible lawyer that thought that the Scottish Government's challenge was going to be successful. The clue was always in the name. It's the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom, just like the British Broadcasting Corporation. It has a slant, it even has a bias, to be perfectly frank. So the idea that the Supreme Court was going to be sympathetic to the nationalist cause was always nonsense. That said, what Lord Reid and his colleagues did say was that the referendum could not be pursued by the Scottish Parliament or Scottish Government. They didn't have the power. But they did indicate that the Scottish people could use a democratic event. The first democratic event, and a democratic event clearly cannot be any larger than an election, is the Holyrood election next year. So if you wish to push for independence, what you have to do is to make sure that you use the list vote as a basis for having a plebiscite or de facto referendum. And that is why we are arguing that the list vote next year, and it's not simply the Alba Party. Many people within the SNP were arguing that, although it was not successful at their conference, but that the list vote should be used as a democratic basis for saying, vote on the list for independent supporting parties. If we get a majority, then that allows us to say that we have a mandate. It is, after all, the policy that the SNP used to pursue when I stood for the SNP in the 80s and indeed the 90s.
Mm-hmm. And the list vote being key, because that's the proportional aspect of the election.
That's a proportional aspect, and if you get the 50% plus, then that is the majority. The current SNP position is that you have to get a majority through them alone, and given the difference in voting patterns between those who support independence and those who support the SNP, that will not be achieved. And even then, they are saying that what would be required is to request a referendum. The time of bending the knee to a British government, of going and asking pretty please to Nigel Farage or Kemi Badenoch, has long since passed, and in fact I think doing so is almost insulting. We know what they're going to say. We've heard from previous UK premiers and the same story will be said. So the time has come to use the opportunity provided, ironically, by the Supreme Court, but supported also by other jurisprudence experts, which is to use the democratic mandate in an election.
Yeah, so John Swinney has said that if the SNP get a majority, they will ask for a referendum again, and that is based on the precedent of 2011. So what's your response to that? Do you not believe in that kind of philosophy?
Well, there's two reasons that won't work. I was part of Alex Salmond's team in 2011. We were returned with what is described as an electoral fluke. I don't see it being repeated. First of all, we were returned on the basis of record team vision, and with all respect to the current administration, I don't think they are as popular as Alex's regime was in 2011. So the likelihood of the SNP achieving that outright majority is just not going to happen. It probably couldn't have been repeated after 2011 and by Alex Salmond, and it certainly won't be repeated by John Swinney. But thereafter, to say that even if they got it, which I don't think they will, but even if they got it, then they're going to go and ask for a referendum. How many times do we have to be told, you're not getting a referendum, Jock, get back in your box, before we say, fine, we'll actually act and take it in a different direction, which is what we do with a plebiscite election. Going to Farage, frankly, is preposterous.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about Hugh Kerr and the fact that he left the Alba Party earlier this week. He said that Alba was in its death throes and likely to die at the next Holyrood election. First of all, how do you feel about what he said there?
Well, I disagree with him. I mean, I've known Hugh a long time. He's not been active in Alba for a while. He is considerably older than me. So good luck to him in what he chooses to do. The Alba Party goes on. We're having meetings with Unite. We're putting forward campaign issues, because Scotland is energy rich and our people are fuel poor. We have been the party that has been driving that, and it's only latterly that the SNP seem to have cottoned on to that. So, we regret anybody leaving our party, but, we live in a democracy, we live in a free society, and people can go and seek to join parties. As it is, it seems that Craig Murray and Hugh Kerr have left our party in a bit of a sulk, criticising us, and aren't exactly being welcomed with open arms by the party they've chosen to go to, but that's for them. The Alba Party is getting on with dealing with the issues in Scotland, especially in the economy. Winter is coming, bad weather's coming. We see turbines turning on and offshore, and folk can't turn on their heating.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Craig Murray there as well, the former British ambassador. So both of those have left Alba in recent days for Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana's Your Party.
Craig Murray stood in the last election when I was standing for the Alba Party for the Workers' Party in Blackburn. He was entitled to do so, but, yes, he was an Alba member, but he was also a Worker Party of Britain candidate last year.
Yeah. So do you think the political landscape is more difficult for Alba to find a place in now there's another radical left-wing party also speaking about Scottish independence?
No, I think the position for Alba is actually very well placed because what we see are those who have been the dissidents, those who have been arguing for a plebiscite election within the SNP. I think they're the ones that we seek to form common cause with. We'll form common cause with anybody who's democratic and supports the advancement of better Scottish interests and those of the Scottish people. people. But fundamentally, we seek to work with those who are supportive of the independence cause. We see that with those who are still within the SNP and try to push for a plebiscite election. But just last week, we announced 7 councillors who are independent, who wish to remain independent because that's the mandate they got at the council elections, but who will be arguing for list vote Alba. We know that there are others out there who will be coming across. So our support is those within the independence movement who see the folly of a referendum strategy, who see the urgency of tackling reform, not by having some meeting convened by John Swinney, but actually taking the only step that will protect us, which is to have a plebiscite election. I remember the 80s and 90s when Labour MPs used to say, protect Scotland for Thatcher, vote Labour. It never worked. Now I see John Swinney saying exactly the same. Protect Scotland from reform, vote SNP. It won't work any more than stopping Thatcher by voting Labour. We have to get out of the United Kingdom, which is spiralling downwards, and it has to be a plebiscite election.
Just a little bit more on your party. One of the Green councillors in Glasgow defected to your party last week, Ellie Gummersall, and she said that your party was the best vehicle for Scottish independence. That's kind of got to hurt, hasn't it, when they've just turned up to the party and you've worked for 4 years to present yourself as the Alternative Independence Party?
Well, I think we persist with our position of the Independence Party. I don't know what's going to happen to your party. I knew Beth Winterwell when she was a Labour MP. She seems to now be out of favour within your party leadership under Zara Sultana. I knew Jeremy Corbyn well and worked with him in Westminster, and I wish Jeremy well. But I don't know who's running your party, and I don't know where the likes of Jeremy stands within it, or indeed where Jamie Driscoll or Beth Winter stand within it. So that's a matter for them. I can only concentrate on the Alba Party game. I can only work with those, as we do, with those who are in Unite, Union, RMT, who are seeking to make sure that we get a just transition, who recognise that Scotland now has a second natural bounty. We had oil and gas, and that's being dissipated and should be getting pursued. We have the situation that is ludicrous, that we're going to be still a major oil producer, and yet the only nation that's a major oil producer that does not have a refinery capacity. We have a second natural bounty in renewables, and yet what we're seeing is we're not getting jobs, we're not getting businesses located here, and worst of all, we're not getting cheap energy. I won't spike the guns of your sister paper, but I know in the coming weekend that there's going to be a major push on renewables, and actually in making sure that Scotland gets a fair crack in the whip in renewables and calls the shots. It's been the Alba Party leading the charge.
So it doesn't sound to me like you're fearing your party at all or seeing them as a particular threat then.
No, good luck to them. I have no objection to them. I have to say, I know Beth Winter. I have a huge admiration for Jeremy Corbyn and for Jamie Driscoll. I don't know the others. Good luck to them. I can only concentrate on the Alba Party and work with others within the dissident section of the SNP who recognise the folly of John Swinney's tragedy. So the independence movement is there. We work across it, all under one banner, at Hope Over Fear, at other organisations. Maybe the Your Party will come along to them at some stage. They've never been there before.
I wanted to speak to you about Alba's campaigning focus, because I think many people will remember the work you did around trying to save Grangemouth, the oil refinery that is now sadly closed. But since then, we've not heard a lot of noise from the party on other issues. What is going to be your next big focus, would you say?
Well, our big focus is on the independence strategy, but it's also on Scotland is energy rich and fuel poor. And I'm sure your sister paper is going to be punting that home, because we have a second natural bounty. Scotland is going to be the resource that provides energy for the UK. It should be the resource that provides energy for the whole of Europe. It's a European energy market. And yet what happens is we are not getting the construction jobs, we're not getting revenue, we're not getting businesses locating here. And indeed, Scotland is a place where it's expensive to do business, never mind expensive to turn on your home. People in the constituency I used to represent, and indeed in the area in which I now live, can look out their houses and can see turbines turning on the hills and turning off shores where they stay, and yet can't turn on the heating. We should be making sure that we get manufacturing here and we get the benefit of cheap energy to heat our homes and have businesses locate here. So we've been pushing that, and it's about time the Scottish Government started fighting for that, because as we've seen with the ScotWind auction, they've actually been selling us short.
You must have been very disappointed with the UK government's decision, although maybe not surprised that the zonal pricing.
Well, zonal pricing should be coming in as far as we're concerned. Why should we simply be a resource? When I was in Parliament, I remember speaking to the National Electricity Supply Operator. They're there to make sure that they take energy from where they say it's produced to where it's required. What does that mean? It means it's produced off the shores of Scotland and it's required on the urban conurbations of England. What are they doing? They're running a giant pylon from the north of Scotland down the east coast of Scotland through the central borders to provide cheap energy for Manchester and Liverpool. Scotland is seeing its environment trashed and getting no benefit from it. Our position is, if they're not going to give us zonal pricing, why should we have pylons? The only reason they're having pylons is they're significantly cheaper than subsea cabling or indeed even burying cables onshore. So the time has come for Scotland to say no more onshore wind, because offshore wind changes the whole dynamic. Offshore wind is a huge bounty. It's why Boris Johnson called us the Saudi Arabia of wind. We are, but we have to get the manufacturing jobs. But indeed, we don't need to have the bean feast that's happening with onshore wind and the absurdity that we can't access the benefit of the energy that's on our hills and off our shores.
Mm-hmm. Just going back to what Hugh Kerr said, I think it's fair to say that the next Holyrood election is a do or die moment for Alba, is it not? I mean, if you didn't get any seats at Westminster last year, and if you don't get any seats at Holyrood next year, you're not going to have any presence at either Parliament, at sort of 2 times of asking. So that would be it, wouldn't it?
The poll that you published on the front page of your paper recently showed that we actually were going to return members. This is just the start of the campaign. And what we're seeing is, I think, that people in the independence movement recognise that our strategy is the way to go, which is why the dissidents, if I can put it that way, don't like using that word because they're good people who are trying to ensure that Scotland gets out of the mess that is this union. So we see the way as upwards, and that the poll that you showed shows us returning members, and indeed we believe that we can build upon that. The dream has never died, and as I say, what Alba Party does after May of next year will be something that we'll consider then. But our intention is to return elected members to keep the foot to the floor for independence, and to demand that if we do get that 50% plus on the list vote, that we take the right for independence and don't go pretty pleased to Westminster when we know the door's going to be shut in our face.
Okay. Ash Regan obviously left the party recently as well, which it ultimately did leave you with no representation in the Scottish Parliament currently. Would you say not having elected representation has hurt you a little bit?
Well, we like to have focus, and everybody wants to have electoral representation. That was a decision taken by Ash, and it's a matter that we respect, and if she wishes to go on. But we work with others, as I've indicated. We already have announced the independent councillors who were elected on an independent ticket and wish to remain so. There's a lot more. We also know people who are in other political parties, especially the SNP, who are happy to work with us, and indeed we're working with them. And I think as we get closer to the election, they will be prepared to speak out, because people recognise the folly of the current strategy. So yes, we want representation, but we believe that will come through next year.
Okay. And just on your independence plan, you've spoken about the plebiscite election. Is that kind of at the core of your kind of independence strategy? Is there any other kind of details that you can give us about how you're approaching the kind of independence question?
Well, I think what you have to do is to make sure that the independence question is made relevant to people. I always use the story I tell about the Grainsmith shop stewards. They're younger, they're under 30, most of them. Some of them probably wouldn't even have had the vote at the time of the referendum. To a man or woman, though, they either voted yes, campaigned yes actively, or indeed would have supported yes had they right to vote. But they worried about whether, independence was relevant and how we got it and whatever needed. And the danger at the present moment is it's seen as kind of otherworldly. Would you like to see Scotland independence? Yes. Would you like Scotland to qualify for the World Cup? Yes. Would you like a warm summer, basking in sunshine? Yes. Do you think it's going to happen? Well, I don't know how or whatever. What you have to do is to make it relevant. And to make it relevant, you have to have the how and the why. The why is we are energy rich and yet fuel poor. We should be seeing skilled jobs coming here. My brother, who's involved in the offshore industry, told me he was at a place in Denmark that makes 70% of onshore turbines. Denmark has the second highest wage rates in the whole of the European continent, and yet they make 70% of the onshore turbines. We've probably lost that boat, sailed in terms of onshore. Offshore, that's there for us. So we have to make sure that we grasp that. So as well as making sure that we have a strategy for independence, we've got to make it relevant. The how is the strategy of the plebiscite election. The why is that we are energy rich yet fuel poor. Why come a holiday to Scotland when you can go to Ireland and it's cheaper? Why set up a business in Scotland when it's cheaper energy to set it up in the Netherlands or indeed in Denmark? We are being priced out of the market, and yet we are the energy capital of Europe.
Yeah. So you'd say that the issue with energy, that kind of democratic deficit, that's how you're going to kind of make the independence issue relevant.
I think that's what makes it relevant to people. I mean, if an old pensioner shivering in their home, worrying over, winter fuel allowance. Why should we be wondering over winter fuel allowance? Our energy costs should not be charged at the rate they are. Not when, we are providing, as will be shown, over 2/3 of, the UK's onshore wind supply. That's going to come in. We already provide more energy than we require. There's also one particular offshore wind farm going to be developed called Berwick Bank at the mouth of the River Firth. It will provide for 2.8 million houses. We only have 2.3. That's one, and it's not on track at the moment. It's not even started. We don't require, as I say, onshore, but more importantly, we provide more energy than we require for ourselves. That means two things. We should be getting revenue for selling it, but more importantly, our people who live here should be getting the benefit of it. As it is, what we're getting is our environment blighted and the energy being sent down south with not a bawbee being given to us.
Okay. Just as one final question before you go, Kenny, if I was to ask you if you were able to tell us what Alba's USP is, your unique selling point, what would that be?
An energy-rich land should not be fuel poverty, and an independent Scotland is the only way we address that. The tragedy of Scotland, Steph, the tragedy of Scotland is not how bad things are, because for people like myself and many of us in Scotland, despite the shameful poverty that exists, this is a good place to stay. The tragedy for Scotland is that things could and should be better. Throughout my lifetime, countries with less opportunities, less natural bounties, less universities of significant stature have all outperformed us. From the Republic of Ireland through Denmark and other countries, it's time Scotland was the nation it can be.
Thank you so much for joining us, Kenny, this afternoon. It's been a pleasure to speak to you, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.